depict this scenario where some of his friends start making some really bad choices. Read this with me. If they say, "Come, let us lie and wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot among us. We will have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths." And he's trying to get his son to see there's going to be these people that are going to come into your life, and they're going to try to encourage you to do things with them that are just not wise. They're not smart. And he says, if they start calling out to you, he said, don't go with them. Don't consent, because these people, they're going to influence your behavior. And I want you to notice the Father's warning is not just, hey, protect yourself against these people. He says, don't go with them. Don't go with those people, because if he goes with these people, it's not just going to affect him and his outcome. It's actually going to change him. And that's what I hope we will see today as we go through our lesson. You know the principle. Bad company corrupts good morals. That's what I hope to show you today. Our format today, for those of you who weren't in our sessions yesterday, it's going to follow a very simple format. I want to give us a principle from Scripture that gives us very clear direction. I want to look at an object lesson, and there's a really powerful object lesson in 2 Chronicles chapter 10, if you want to start flipping over there with me and putting your finger there. That helps us understand the impact of this principle. And then I want to talk about what that looks like practically for us today. I do want to have some discussion with you. In fact, the very end of this session, we're going to look through some scriptures, and I hope that you will interact with me, and we can talk about very practically what this looks like. But just think with me about this. You can tell a lot about a person by the company they keep, can't you? You can tell if someone is popular or not. You can usually tell if somebody's a troublemaker or not. You can tell what kind of things people are involved in, whether it's band or theater or gardening or bees or whatever it might be, based on the company that they keep. And these are generalizations. They may not be true in every case, but this reveals the important principle that I want us to think about this morning, and that comes from Proverbs chapter 13. If I can get this thing to work, where do I have to point it? I got to hold my mouth just right. That's what it is. Here's the principle I want to work with this morning. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. There's three things I want you to see from this verse that are going to dictate what we think about this morning. And the first is this. There we go. Good people, they're going to make you better. I need to point it up there. That's what it is. Okay. So three things I want us to see from this verse. The first is good people make you better, right? But I want you to notice from this verse, it's not just any kind of good people. It's wise people. People who are listening to God's word. People who are trying to make good choices. Who are learning from life experience. If you choose to walk with these kinds of people, the principle is you're going to be wise too, right? Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that wisdom is true? This is for you guys. Influence matters, right? The more time you spend around someone who's making good choices, you're going to observe it, right? The things that we see, we begin to do in our lives. We tend to imitate what we regularly see. And so if you live your life around good people, that's going to make you better. But we need to see that converse is also true. Good people will make you better, but bad friends will have a negative impact on your life. This is the bad company corrupts good morals principle. In fact, in these verses, or in this verse here in Proverbs chapter 13 and verse number 20, it kind of shows us that dumb people make dumber choices together, right? That's what I'm seeing here. And again, I've seen that from some of my own life experience. But this really leads to the main point of the proverb and what I think the wise man is trying to help us see. And that is that you actually become like the people you spend time with. I want you to think about that for a minute. We're not just influenced by the people that are around us. We actually become like them. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. The companion of the fool, he becomes a fool. He suffers harm. So to put this another way, your friends actually define who you are becoming. There's a man in the business world, his name is Jim Rohn. He's a well-known speaker, a motivational speaker, has a lot of business acumen. He has captured this principle, and he says it this way. He says, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Do you understand what that means? If you look at the people in your life, the 5 people that you spend the most time with, the idea is that you're going to become kind of a combination of those people because of their influence. And I'm sure we've all seen this happen to some extent in our lives, right? Whenever you're around certain people, you start to use the same words, the same phrases as them. Maybe you use the same hand gestures as they do, right? You kind of have the same ideas. You go to the same places. You like the same things that they like. You become like the people that you spend time with. And so I want you to think about this. When you think about the people that are in your life, the people that you spend the most time with, what kind of person are you becoming? Now, I understand we can't always control the people that we're around because, we have to go places like school and work, and there are folks that we just naturally have to be around. But this verse to me really emphasizes the reality that wise relationships are a choice. They don't happen by accident. You don't just fall into these. That's part of the Father's warning in Proverbs. Look, just because these people are around you and want to be around you, it doesn't mean you have to walk with them. It doesn't mean they have to be your people. You need to choose to walk with the wise, or else you will be the companion of fools and you will suffer harm. And so in order to walk with the wise, you've got to consider what a wise person looks like. You got to seek those people out, and you got to choose to walk with them. That's what I want us to take away from this lesson today. We have a choice. We have a choice about who our people are going to be, who we're going to let impact us. We have a choice with whom we will walk. And I would argue this is one of the most important choices that you have in your life. Not just when you're a young person, but it's true even for all of us as we get older. It matters who your friends are. Because the people that you're spending time with are the ones that are influencing who you become. And we see this very clearly in our object lesson, 2 Chronicles chapter 10, in the story of a man named Rehoboam. Now, Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, the third king of Israel. And as we come into 2 Chronicles chapter 10, things are very positive for the nation of Israel. Solomon has grown the kingdom beyond where it's ever been. There's prosperity. The scriptures tell us that even Solomon's servants are happy to be living in this kingdom. It's a good place to live. And Solomon had done lots of good things for the kingdom. He had ruled them well. And after he died, the kingdom is in this place where it's actually ready for his son to take over. The people are willing to follow Rehoboam, his son. Now begin reading with me here in 2 Chronicles chapter 10, beginning in verse number 1. Now Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. And as soon as Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, for he was in Egypt where he had fled from King Solomon, then Jeroboam returned from Egypt. And they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came and said to Rehoboam, so Rehoboam is Solomon's son. They said this to him, verse 4, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. And he said to them, come to me again in 3 days. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who had stood before Solomon his father while he was yet alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer this people? And they said to him, if you will be good to this people and please them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. Now I want to hit the pause button right there. I want to think about what's going on here. Rehoboam is in a perfect position, isn't he? It's in a perfect position to take over the country, to rule well. I mean, it was expected that he was king. The people have gathered together for his coronation. They're basically saying, we will follow you. We will let you be our king. But they had an issue, right? They had an issue with some things that Solomon had done previously in his rule, something about taxes that his father had imposed on him. And so they approached him very reasonably. And I want you to notice Rehoboam, he made a really wise choice here, didn't he? It says that Rehoboam took counsel. He took counsel with the older men. These are men who stood with his father Solomon, who had seen over the years the way that the country had gone. They had experience in leading in the nation and advising a king and how things ought to go. And Rehoboam, in his wisdom, he says, I should probably talk to those people. I should probably get insight from them. He took counsel with the older men who had stood before Solomon, and they gave him some advice. You need to be kind to the people, because if you do, these people will follow you to the ends of the earth. I would say he made a pretty good choice. He's choosing to walk with the wise, isn't he? But then, what happened? I want you to notice. Let's pick up in verse number 8. But Rehoboam abandoned the counsel that the old men gave him, and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. And he said to them, what do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, lighten the yoke that your father has put on us? So he asks the same question to his friends that you notice the text very explicitly tells us he grew up with them. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. So he asks them the same question. Give me counsel. What should I do? Verse 10. And the young men who had grown up with him said to him, thus you shall speak to the people who said to you, your father made our yoke heavy, but you lighten it for us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. And now whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. Verse 12, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king said, come to me again the third day. And the king answered them harshly, and forsaking the counsel of the old men, King Rehoboam spoke to them according to the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people. For it was a turn of affairs brought about by God, that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. And when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, what portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Each of you to your own tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, David. So all Israel went to their tents. Do you see what happened here? So here is Rehoboam. He started off in such a good place, asking these older heads, hey, what can I do here? But the text goes out of our way to tell us that he abandoned this counsel. He forsook the counsel of these older folks. And instead, what did he do? He went and found his friends that he had grown up with. And he said, I want to know what you guys think I should do. And who did he end up listening to? It was his friends. He rejected the older wisdom. I want you to think about how Rehoboam handled the situation. He had a group of older men who cared about him, who cared about the kingdom, who cared about his success, who were giving him really good advice. They wanted to help him, but instead of listening to them, he listened to his friends. Now, why would he do that? Think about that with me. Why do you think Rehoboam would reject that counsel and listen to his friends instead of this older wisdom? Why do you think? It's not a trick question, I promise. What do you think? Yeah, you think about the people that you grow up with. You have similar life experiences, similar perspective, right? Similar paradigms about what's important. Obviously, what they said resonated with him. And that tends to be how it is with people that we grow up with, isn't it? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It seems to me from his response to them, he was really quick to jump on this. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. Because it resonated with him. And that tends to be how we behave, isn't it? When we hear what we want, it's really easy to get on board with that, especially if there are other people who are saying, yeah, this is the right way to go. Todd?
We are unwise. We like to listen to our buds, our
Sure.
teachers. The older generation is old-fashioned.
That's right. Well, and I think that's why the scriptures go out of their way to show us these were people he grew up with, that he valued their opinions. They aligned with what he wanted, and he rejected someone that was unlike him. And the scriptures wants to see that's just not wise. Because, I mean, think about how this ends. This doesn't end well, does it? And we're going to get to that more in just a moment. But I think you're exactly right, Todd. We have a tendency to gravitate towards people that align with us. And you see this all the time on social media, don't you? And people get louder and louder and louder because they find voices that are just like them, that are willing to affirm their positions and say, yeah, I'm with you on that. Look, you can always find a crowd of people that will agree with you no matter what it is, no matter how foolish your position is. You will always find a crowd of people. That's what Proverbs chapter 1 is all about. This group of sinners that are trying to entice the Father's Son. They're clearly making foolish choices, and yet they have found a crowd of people that say, yeah, this is the way we want to go. You will always find that. Young people, you will always find people who will agree with you no matter what you do. Those aren't the people you need to be looking for. You need to be looking for people who care about you and care about God's way and are giving you wise counsel. Because of his relationship with these young men, their advice prevailed over those who had more experience and had given him wise counsel. And it says here that he dealt with the people harshly. And I want us just to appreciate, this is really the power that influence has in our lives and why it matters who your friends are. If he had had different friends, this whole situation could have played out very differently. But because of the people he allowed into his life that he had grown up with, things went south real fast. But just listening to them wasn't the problem. The problem was their ideas were divisive. Their ideas were foolish. Right? They wanted him to assert power, and when he did, what happened? Immediately, the kingdom fractured. Let's go on to read the rest of this. Verse 16. And when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, what portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Each of you to your tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, David. So all Israel went to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, and the people of Israel stoned him to death with stones. And King Rehoboam quickly mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. This is one of those moments that would change his life forever. Rehoboam didn't realize that this was one of those life-changing moments. And I want you to appreciate with me, this moment didn't just change Rehoboam's life forever. It changed the nation of Israel forever. If you know and are familiar with the Bible story, this is a pivotal moment in the history of Israel because they were a unified nation under God, his people. But from now on, they would now and forever be two different nations. In fact, they would be two different nations that would fight against each other. They were family. And now they are divided and against each other for the rest of human history. I mentioned this on Friday. I realize not every moment is this profound, but some moments are. And we never know when that moment is going to be. Now, if Rehoboam had known the impact of his choice, do you think he would have made a different choice in the moment? Perhaps. It's a question I like to ask whenever I read these kinds of things in Scripture, but the reality is, even when Eve knew the consequence of her choice, she still chose to walk this path. And Rehoboam, even if he had known the outcome, he may have still chosen to walk this path, and a lot of it had to do with the power of influence. His friends were more important to him than knowing and doing what is right, and their influence clouded his judgment. This tends to be how relationships work. Relationships are very important to us. They impact what we think is important. They impact the way that we speak to others. They impact the way that we carry ourselves. We value the opinions of those we spend time with, and we trust so much so that it can actually distort our reality. Why do you think Rehoboam would have ever thought that being harsher to the people would have been good for him? It didn't make any sense. But in that moment, all he could see was, I've got to assert myself. I've got to make my friends happy. I have to make this choice and show them who is the boss. And that ended terribly for him. But he had people in his life who were trying to help him see beyond the moment and see, if you treat these people kindly, they'll be with you forever. He didn't think beyond the moment. He didn't allow those influences to help him. Listen, God is merciful to each one of us, and he always allows us these sorts of people in our life. I like to call these moments of mercy. You read through the Bible story, and God provides moments of mercy to all of us where we have this clarity about what is really right, what I should be doing. And sometimes it's in the form of a person. Sometimes it's just in the form of our own awareness. Whatever the case, God gives us these moments where we have a choice we have to make. Who am I going to listen to? Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. You need to look at the people in your life and look at the influences in your life, and you need to ask yourself the question, who is it that is truly trying to get me closer to God? Who is trying to help me in my life? Got to think beyond the moment. You might not think that the influence of others greatly affects you in your life choices, but both secular wisdom and biblical wisdom teaches us otherwise. It matters who your friends are, because bad company corrupts good morals. If you want to walk with God, you've got to choose to walk with the wise. And so I want to end by thinking about what these sorts of people look like. The Bible gives us a lot of direction about what wise friends look like and what this path of wisdom looks like. Proverbs really is a great place to go in doing this. But what I want to think about is, what sort of friends does God tell us to look for? So this is where I want to have some discussion with you guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some verses up here on the screen. I want us to read them together. And I want to just talk about what sort of friends God tells us to look for, what sort of friends we ought to be, how we can learn to walk with the wise. So here's my first set of verses. Let's flip over here to Proverbs chapter 17. We'll read these together, and let's just talk about this. What does it look like? What sort of friends does God want us to have that are going to help us? What do wise friends look like? Proverbs chapter 17 and verse number 17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." Now stick your finger there and flip over there to Galatians chapter 6 and verse number 2. We'll read this one as well. These two kind of go together. Galatians chapter 6 and verse number 2. It says, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." As you listen to these two verses, what sort of friends is God telling us to look for? What do you see in these verses? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's exactly right. We need people in our life who are not just trying to use you as leverage, right? And I can tell you, there's a lot of people in this world that are very interested in what they can get from you, and they don't care a lick about you. You think about that parable of the prodigal son. I think this is an obscure detail in all this. The parable of the prodigal son, he goes and he leaves and he goes into a far country with a bag full of money, He is flying high. He enjoys it. But what happens when all of his money runs out? He has no friends. Why? All his friends cared about was what they could get from him. I mean, in his moment of need, it doesn't tell us all this explicitly, but in his moment of need, when everything runs out and he has nothing else to give them, there is no one to be found. He's in such a bad place. He's left feeding pigs. Listen, we need somebody. That's what I see in these verses, is we need somebody who encourages us, who is there for you. What else do you see in these verses? Anything else? Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yeah, that's a great thought. You know, the truth is we're all going to face difficult times. We are. And if you just have these friends that are there for the good times, you're not going to have people when you truly need them, right? And that, let me tell you, kids, you're going to find times in your life when you are just in dire circumstances and you need somebody. You need to be developing relationships with people that are forged for those moments. And you don't just forge those moments by just playing video games and doing fun stuff with people. That comes by having hard conversations, expecting people to hold you accountable and being accountable to other people. By having those moments where you encourage them and say, let's do what's right. Because you're exactly right. We're all going to face those moments where we need people. And you know, those of us that have lived life long enough, we've gotten to those moments, right, where our life is hard, and you kind of find out who your friends are, don't you? You know, it's interesting in the story of David, whenever Absalom rebelled against David, David left Jerusalem. So Absalom was David's son, right? This was one of the most difficult seasons of David's life. His son rebelled against him, brought an army, comes in and occupies Jerusalem, and David's like, I'm not willing to fight against him. And as David is leaving, there's a lot of people who are defecting from him, who are leaving and joining Absalom because they're like, he's got the power, I'm with him. But as you read through the story of David, the scriptures go out of its way to show us there were people that stayed with David who were loyal to him. And he really found out who his friends were in that moment of adversity. People who were willing to stand with him and die with him because of their loyalty to him and not just their loyalty to his power. This requires some discernment, right? This is something that as you mature, you'll grow to see. People have motives. People are not always what they seem. You need to be developing relationships with people and friendships with people who encourage you and who will truly stick with you when times are tough. And you need to be that sort of friend. You guys see anything else in these verses about what a good friend looks like? Sure.
Galatians 6:2 talks about the law of Christ.
You know, that's something that biblical wisdom always brings us back to. We're not just looking for good people with good morals. We're looking with people who want us, bring us to this place of, I want you to be right with God. And there's a difference there. Because you'll find a lot of people that have good morals everywhere. But it's the people that want you to become more like Christ. Those are the people you really need in your life. I'm not saying we can't have friends who don't go to church with us. But at the end of the day, as we're trying to make our way from here to heaven, as we're trying to walk like Jesus Christ, you need to have people in your life that are influencing you, that are saying the most important thing to me is becoming like Christ, and I want you to do the same. That's such a great thought that cannot be overlooked in this. Good friends are not just people who are there for you. They're people who want what is most eternally important for you, to know Jesus and to walk with him. Yeah, appreciate that thought. Anything else you guys see from these verses? All right, let's go to the next couple of verses here. Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22. Verses 24 through 25. This is a kind of a negative set of verses. It says, make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. Put your finger there and go to Titus chapter 3 and verse number 10. Titus 3 and verse number 10. As for a person who stirs up division after warning him once and then twice, have nothing more to do with him, knowing that such a person is warped and sinful. He is condemned. Now, obviously, these verses have a very specific bend, but I want you to notice, there in Proverbs 22, it says, make no friendship with this kind of person. What kind of person are we supposed to look for or maybe not look for? Here, what do you see in these verses? I promise this is not a trick question. What do you see in these verses about what a good friend does or does not look like? Yes, ma'am. Sure. Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great point. The words that you use there, selfish and I don't know if you said this, conflict is someone, there are certain people that are kind of given to that, aren't they? They tend to be pot stirrers. They tend to have very strong emotions. And I'm not saying that someone can't change or that someone can't mature through those things. But it seems to me the wise man is pointing to someone that is given to this way of life right now. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man. Somebody that is angry a lot, who's divisive, that creates strife. Those aren't the kind of people that you want in your life, because they create more conflict, don't they? But you notice what it says about that in verse number 25 of Proverbs 22? Why should we not spend time with these sorts of people? It's a snare for your soul. You're going to learn his ways. And the Father is saying, you don't need to be like that. That's not good for you. You spend time around these sorts of people who are given to anger. There we go. What you're going to do is you're going to become more like them. You're going to be someone who's divisive, who spreads rumors, who says hurtful things, who gets into the comparison game. Because you'll become just like them. You'll be a snare for your soul. I wanted to put this negative up there because it's really easy to talk about, the positives of what a good friend should look like. The scriptures also make it a point to say there are certain folks you just don't need to spend time with. That doesn't mean you don't need to try to have influence on them or try to help them. What he's talking about is the people that are your people. You don't need to invest yourself in someone who is given to anger or who is wrathful or who is always contentious, because those sorts of people will destroy you. I imagine the folks that Rehoboam had in his life, they seem to be these kinds of people. I mean, you think about the counsel that they gave him. Man, let them have it. Tell them that I'm going to discipline them even more, right? You get that vengeance from them. They were these kinds of people, and he learned their ways. He became just like them. And it destroyed him. It destroyed his kingdom. Anything else you guys see in these verses that we read here? Proverbs or Titus? Okay, let's go to the next one. Proverbs chapter 24. (21 through 22). My son, fear the Lord and the king, and do not join with those who do otherwise, for disaster will arise suddenly from them, and who knows the ruin that will come from them both. What sort of friend is described here? What do you see in these verses? Yes. Yeah, you're exactly right. This is somebody, he says, you don't need to be spending time with people who don't respect God, don't respect the king, don't respect authority. I think that that's the big driver in all of this. Why is that? Why does that matter? Why do we need someone to have friends who respect authority? Well, I'll tell you this. I would argue that authority is something that is fundamental to our faith. Right? If we don't respect the authority of God, we're not going to listen to anything he has to say, right? And if we don't respect the authority of God, we're not going to respect those who lead us. Romans chapter 13 speaks very plainly about this, about how we're supposed to treat authority and respect authority because all authority is from God, right? You've seen people that don't respect authority, haven't you? I think we live in a world where there's a lot of those folks who like to bash on anyone who's in a position of authority because, hey, we're Americans. We're given that right and given that liberty, right? We live in a time when free speech, that's I can say anything that I want, right? But we need to pump the brakes on that. We need to pump the brakes on that because God expects us as his people to respect any position of authority. And I can tell you, you've seen the people that don't respect authority, right? The way that they act, those kids, right, that talk back to the teachers, don't respect authority. How does that usually go for those kind of kids? Not good, right? And those kids grow up to be adults, and we still see those adults in the workplace, right, who don't respect authority, who don't listen to what the boss has to say, who kind of buck against what anybody tells them to do, who like to badmouth people in positions of authority. That's just not how it ought to be. Those aren't the kind of people that we ought to be. God cares about how we behave towards authority because respecting authority is fundamental to both life and to faith. If we don't respect the authority of God, we won't respect the authority of anyone. And really what we're doing is we're disrespecting God. Isn't that what he says here? My son, fear the Lord and the king, and do not join with those who do otherwise, for disaster will arise suddenly from them. And who knows the ruin that will come from both. That's a whole other study in and of itself to think about what happens when we do reject authority and the implications of that. Because really, once you start rejecting authority, there's no end to that. It just leads to further conflict in your life. Because there has to be some source of authority. And God tells us, I am that source of authority. And so if you walk with people who fundamentally reject authority, it's not just going to impact the relationship that you have with your bosses or your parents or the government. It's going to impact your relationship with God. Because we have to respect authority if we're going to respect God. Anything else you guys see from those verses? Proverbs 24. Yes, ma'am. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. You're exactly right about that. All right, let's go to our next set of verses. Proverbs 27. Proverbs 27. Let's read verses 5 and 6. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Hold your place there and look at Ephesians chapter 4 with me. Ephesians chapter 4. Verse 25 says, therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. And verse number 29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. What do you see here in these verses about what a good friend looks like? Man, isn't that the truth? A good friend will look at you and say, hey, you got a smudge on your face. Or, hey, man, the way you're acting, that's not right. We need those kind of people in our life, don't we? We need somebody who's willing to be honest with us, even if it's uncomfortable and awkward. You know, if I'm getting out of line and I'm starting to talk in a way that I'm not supposed to be talking, I need somebody who's willing to say, hey, Daniel, whoa, you need to chill out. Because there's sometimes I don't always have the right control of myself that I should. And we ought to be holding one another accountable for that, right? Accountability is something that is huge as you walk by faith. And that's part of the reason God gave us the church. We're supposed to hold one another accountable. And the way we hold one another accountable is by the things that we say to one another, the way that we interact with one another. We must be accountable to each other and have someone that's able and willing to tell us the truth, even when it's not what we want to hear. What else do you guys see in these verses?
Always telling you that you're right, you're great, and
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, this is not to say we need people in our lives who the only thing they do is drop truth bombs. I'm not saying that. Those kind of people can be kind of annoying, let's be honest about that. But we do need those people who encourage us. And you know, this is not a purely negative principle. We need people who help us see ourselves in our life more clearly. And that leads us to our last principle. Looks like we're out of time here, but this last principle that I want to share with you. Let's just read Proverbs 27:17, just for the sake of time. I'm sure you've heard this verse, but this really captures the kind of friends that we need to be looking for. Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. We need friends who make us better. We don't just need people who are content to coddle us where we are. We don't just need people who tell us the things that we want to hear. What we need, a good friend, is someone who sharpens you, who makes you better, who by you two coming together, you see yourself more clearly, you become more sharp in your thinking and your behavior and everything that you do. Friendship is a blessing from God that can enrich our lives. And God wants us to have people in our lives that make us sharper, more effective. He wants us to be around people who think about our best interest and find ways to make us better. Don't you want to be around these kinds of people? How do you find these kinds of people? I'll tell you one very simple way. You become this kind of person. All of the things that we've talked about, you're not just looking for these things in others. You need to practice this. You need to be this kind of friend. And when you become this kind of friend, what you will find is those kinds of people come to you. That's how God's design works for us. And so listen, if you're going to walk with the wise, or if you want to walk with the wise, you've got to learn to find what the wise person looks like, because then you will become wise. But the companion of fools will suffer harm. All right, guys, thank you for your time and attention this morning. We're all out of time. Thanks for your thoughts.